Hello, everyone. My name is Adriana Calderon. I'm the Director of Transfer Pricing Solutions Asia. And today I will be speaking about the new transfer pricing guidelines for headquarters located in Singapore, released by IRAS on the 21st of March 2021. Before we go into the detail, just a brief introduction about our firm. We specialize in providing practical, proactive, and cost-effective transfer pricing advice. We are a group of advisors from Big Four at mid-tier firm that specialize in providing transfer pricing advisory service located in Australia, Singapore, and Malaysia. I am the transfer pricing technical leader for our Asia firm, which main office is located in Singapore and Malaysia, with more than 15 years of experience in advising multinational companies with their transfer pricing problems. And as the topic of today is basically the new transfer pricing guidelines for headquarters located in Singapore. So why did IRAS release these guidance? There is a prominent industry in Singapore, which is a place or a preferred place for headquarter, either ultimate headquarter or regional headquarter. So what is the role of a headquarter in an organization? Headquarter in a multinational group could have various roles, and that can be grouped in 5 main areas. 1 will be centralized key decision making. 2, management and coordination. 3, build customer insights. 4, develop product and services strategies for local markets. And 5, achieving economics of scales and cost efficiencies. So why is Singapore a preferred location? Singapore is located at the heart of Asia and is often a preferred location to set up headquarters due to the presence of key attributes that are essential for headquarter activities. Singapore ranks amongst the top in the world in terms of competitiveness, economy, and ease of doing business. In addition, Singapore's strategic location is a unique combination for allowing Singapore-based headquarters to host a range of business activities. So what are the type or what commercially Singapore offers? It offers supply chain management, global financial center, professional services, a strong talent base, a very strong legal, regulatory, and tax framework, and a digital infrastructure and cyber resilience. So if Singapore commercially offers all these attributes to headquarters, what IRAS wants to ensure is that headquarters are compensated appropriately for their contribution to the value chain of any multinational group. So the question that IRAS wants to ensure that addresses with the e-tax guide is question number 1, is Singapore HQ being remunerated with a fair share of income and profits? And is IRAS receiving a fair share of tax from multinational entities? Considering that MNC groups are increasingly leveraging from Singapore as their HQ, Singapore-based service providers have deepened capabilities and broadened their network to support business, innovation, and talent needs of HQ. The role and remuneration of the Singaporean HQ are compromised as the IRAS has not been as aggressive as other tax authorities in other countries. So that's why IRAS wants to ensure that the profit allocation to Singapore HQs is not compromised to please other tax authorities. So what are the potential centralized activities in a multinational group that in practice IRAS is seen to be part of the Singapore HQ? So there could be a range of activities and services that a multinational group can centralize. And these focus on the economic value contribution of these centralized activities in Singapore and their importance for the multinational group. At the same time, the guide provides guidance on analyzing the regional centralized activities carried out in Singapore, along with the factors that may affect the transfer price for the activities and the most appropriate methods. So what could be the centralized activities that are performed by multinational groups? So IRAS distinguish very clearly in two main roles that Singapore HQ could play within a multinational group, which are either as an entrepreneur or a centralized service provider. An entrepreneur makes key business decisions, performs significant functions, assumes significant risk, and has the financial capacity to assume this risk. On the other hand, a centralized service provider is also known as a cost center that performs low-value activities that are centralized in that particular company located in Singapore. So why is this important from a transfer pricing point of view? Depending on the role of that HQ and the type of functions, assets, and risks that are being performed, the transfer pricing can differ from from being an entrepreneur to being a centralized service provider. So what are the main activities that can be undertaken by a HQ? Activity number one is being a principal in distribution, manufacturing, or research and development arrangements. Activity number two will be activities related to core business processes. Activity three, activities related to administrative, technical, financial, commercial, management, coordination, and control functions. And activity number four will be share activities or shareholder activities. So these four type of activities have a different type of remuneration when it comes to transfer pricing. So the reason being that they are considered or they have different levels of expertise and skill needed. So if we start with the principal in distribution, manufacturing, or research and development arrangement, the nature of this activity is a risk-taking and decision-making. Therefore, the level of expertise and skill is high, and it provides a benefit to the multinational group, and its compensation for this activity should be a service charge that can be in the form of a service charge and residual profits. Why? Because the principal on the entrepreneur takes a higher risk, and performing that activity requires a high level of expertise and skill. When the HQ perform activities related to core business processes, these activities consider a medium level activity in terms of expertise and skill. It also provides benefits to the group, and it is also entitled to a service charge. Activity 3 that relates to administrative, technical, financial, commercial, management, coordination, and control function are generally routine in nature, and what it means is that they are non-core to the business, and they are basically supporting to the business. So if the activities are routine and non-core, they are considered low in terms of expertise and skill, and they also provide a benefit to the multinational group, and they also should be compensated, probably with a lower service charge in comparison with the core business processes, because both the principal and the core require a high level of expertise and skill. And the fourth activity is shareholder activities that relate to activities to other group entities that are performed from the perspective of shareholder. those activities do not have any level of expertise and skill, they do not benefit the group, and therefore they should not be charged. So this position is very consistent with the OECD guidance on intragroup services. So what are the assets utilized by a headquarter? When the headquarter performs principal activities or entrepreneurial activities, it will have intangible property, it will have operating premises, fixtures and equipment, raw materials, packing materials, and finished goods when it's performing manufacturing activities. If what the Singapore HQ is performing is a centralized service provider, it doesn't have or it doesn't own any intangibles. It may have operating premises, it may have fixtures and equipment, and is not or it will not have any raw materials, packing materials, and finished goods because it's just a service provider. In terms of risk assumed, the multinational group can assume a broad range of risk from market and economic risk, commercial risk, supply chain risk, product liability risk, inventory risk, capacity risk, operational risk, and foreign exchange risk. When the HQ assumes a risk for transfer pricing purposes, it needs to control the risk and has the financial capacity to assume the risk. So if the HQ is acting as a principal, it might assume the majority or entirely all the risk associated with the activities that it performs as the principal, whereas if it's performing only centralized services in the form of core or non-core, then it will have less range of risks that are being assumed because it's just a service provider as opposed to a principal, and it will only assume the risk associated with providing that service. So if we see the summary here, when a HQ is acting as a principal, it assumes all or some of the key business risk arising from its activities. When it conducts activities related to core services, it manages some critical business risk for the multinational group. When it conducts a non-core or routine activities such as administrative, financial, commercial, it assumes risks that are generally limited to the operational risk of providing the service. So if we see an example here, this M&E group operates in the fastest moving consumer goods industry. It has established a regional HQ entity in Singapore, Company A, that is a strategic move to be closer to the APAC market. Company A makes strategic decisions on markets within the Asia-Pacific region, including the opening or closing of distributing subsidiaries, launch of new products in existing markets, and the product mix in each market. Consequently, Company A is responsible for the performance of the APAC region. Company A also performs centralized activities, which means that the related parties do not need to duplicate efforts and perform some of the activities on its own. So in this particular case, there could be several activities that are being performed by the regional HQ. One is licensing from the global HQ to contract manufacturer. Procuring, which involves sourcing and procure of raw materials to contract manufacturers. Manufacturing, which involves overseeing and support to contract manufacturers. Demand planning, project and planning demand for finished goods. Supply, plan production and delivering time with the contract manufacturer. Distribution, which involves purchases from contract manufacturers and resale. Sales and marketing, plan and execute marketing strategy with the distributors. Centralized services such as HR, finance, and legal. Some of the assets that that company can be utilizing includes furniture and fixtures, computer hardware, equipment and laboratory equipment, raw materials and finished goods, licenses, patents, and production technology from the global HQ. What are some of the risks that this company can be assuming? Market and economic risks associated with the APAC region, commercial risk, supply chain risk, product liability risk, inventory risks, environmental risk, capacity risk, foreign exchange risk, and operational risk. So the question is, if company A performed a series of activities, what should be the transfer pricing applied to compensate company A? So, for example, for the license of legal trademarks and technology from Global HQ, most likely company A will be paying a royalty, and for that, it will have to apply the COP method. For activity number 2, which is the sales of raw materials to contract manufacturer, it will be performing a service, and for that service, it should be compensated with a net cost plus. If it purchase of finished goods from contract manufacturers, then it is also performing a service, and it should be earning a net cost plus. If it sells finished products to related distributors, depending on the arrangement, it should apply a TNMM and remunerate or compensate on an operating margin basis. If it provides centralized services to the related parties, such as HR, legal, and tax, then it will have to earn a net cost plus, applying the transactional net margin method to earn a markup on the total cost. Now, if we think about and come back to the structure, if company A, apart from performing all these activities, also contributes or own some level of intangible property, or it operates as a principal for the region, it will also have to consider the attribution of residual profits as a result of its contribution of intangible property within the multinational group. So by seeing this example, it is clear that IRS has an interest to make sure that Singapore headquarters get compensated for the value contribution that they provide to multinational groups in the region, especially when Singapore is a strategic step or a step for any multinational group to enter into Asia. So I think a couple of points that are important here is that regardless of what the multinational group is doing, whether it is centralized services or whether it is being an entrepreneur, transfer pricing documentation needs to be prepared to show evidence on how the price is in line with the arm's length principle. And it needs to be prepared to plan an appropriate transfer price contemporaneously to the implementation of the transaction, to make sure that it gives support to the HQ when lodging the tax return for the particular basis period. What should be included in the TP documentation is almost entirely consistent with our main transfer pricing legislation, which is that it needs to include an economic analysis with circumstances and business strategies of the related party transaction, a detail on value generation and interdependencies of the functions performed, a thorough functional analysis, reliable evidence and document to support the HQ assumption and management of risk. If there is services, a clear delineation of the benefit test, and a price setting policy, including the appropriate transfer pricing method used and the basis for selecting the method. And this word price setting is important because the idea is that the HQ basically plans in advance to implement the prices on all the transactions appropriately and in accordance with the arm's length principle. And what are our top tips? So tip number one is to gather a robust documentation for planning purposes. So you can document the appropriate evaluation and role of the HQ and the benefits that it provides to the multinational group. Point number three, which is critical, is to assess the functional profile of the HQ to characterize either as an entrepreneur or a centralized service provider. And for that, a thorough functional analysis is required to be able to characterize appropriately the HQ. Conduct a benchmarking analysis to test your related party transactions and remunerate the HQ based on its functional profile and benefits provide. So I think what is very clear is that IRS is not prepared to understand or to forego its fair share of tax or sacrifice its share of tax when multinational groups benefit commercially in a lot of ways by setting up a regional HQ or an ultimate HQ or an international HQ in Singapore. So that's it from me today. If you have any questions, feel free to send us an email. My email is here. Feel free to follow us on our social media channels, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and feel free to inquire about our services. We can assist companies with or regional and ultimate head offices with transfer pricing planning, transfer pricing documentation for the region, preparation of master file, global regional benchmarking, and also contracts. Okay, thank you very much. Bye.